In my opinion, the Z-Line 7 could mean a turnaround for BYD, and we'll explore together why that is. And with that, hey and welcome to this new video here at Joneus, and welcome to the premiere and the first driving impression of the BYD Sealion 7. Not a direct competitor to the VW ID.5 or even to a Tesla Model Y, and it aims to truly shake up the market landscape with some intelligently designed features and very promising technology. And if you don't want to miss such content in the future, subscribe to the channel for free below the video. We're on our way to 50,000 subscribers, and I'd be super thrilled if you were part of it. Unfortunately, we only have 90 minutes today with the car, so the video will differ a bit. We are driving as much as we possibly can in order to accurately determine what the actual consumption is. Now, a bit of city driving here, soon a short country road trip, and then a long stretch on the highway, just to get a good feel for it, because honestly, I was quite a bit shocked when reading only 502 kilometers according to the WLTP standards. With 91 kilowatt hours of battery capacity, this means that the car should consume an average of over 18 kilowatt hours according to the standard consumption. And that would be almost a bit high for me considering the vehicle size, especially when you're supposed to compare it to a VW ID.4, ID.5, and a Tesla Model Y. They manage to achieve greater ranges even though they usually have smaller batteries. So let's take a closer look here together. That's how it goes, as the car's other features really are quite extremely promising. In contrast to the Seal U, the Sealion 7 is actually built on the E-Platform 3.0, just like the Seal, and this characteristic is quite evident in its visual design features. Because this front design closely resembles the flatter sedan. This is an advantage for the car and makes it more aesthetically pleasing, in my perspective. At 4.83 meters in length, the car is among the somewhat larger SUVs and competes, in my opinion, with the new Audi Q6 e-tron, for example. At the front of the vehicle, there's a fresh new light signature with double U-shaped headlights that somewhat remind you of the current Renault models, as well as, naturally, those from BMW. The wheelbase offers ample space for housing the two different batteries, which are rated at 82.5 or 91.3 kilowatt hours each. These batteries are entirely cobalt-free and utilize LFP battery technology similar to the smaller 12-volt battery. In this case, every bit of lead is completely avoided. This provides ranges of 482 and 456 kilometers in the all-wheel drive version, and for a distance of 502 kilometers in the Excellence Performance variant. The basis is the blade battery, which also determines the structure of the car. Unlike other models, there is no traditional floor panel present. Rather, the battery itself defines and provides the structural framework within the vehicle. This is intended to save weight and make the car even more efficient. However, the most challenging aspect for BYD in the past was the charging performance, and that has finally been improved. Even though the small battery can charge from 10 to 80% in 32 minutes with only 150 kW, the large one, thanks to 230 kW charging power, manages it in just 24 minutes from 10 to 80%, and there is a vehicle-to-load function. It has the capability to power other devices with a maximum of 3.3 kilowatts. The entirely new and meticulously developed rear motor seems to be the new great pride of BYD, as a lot of emphasis was placed on it during the whole presentation. 23,000 revolutions per minute are supposed to be possible. Just for reference, many other electric cars are at 16,000 and the Tesla Model S Plaid is at 20,000. Let's take a closer look at how that impacts the consumption. The back features the traditional design of a sleek coupe-style electric SUV. This means there's a kind of dual spoiler, a continuous light strip, and the reference that the Sealion 7 accelerates from 0 to 100 in 4.5 seconds in its highest configuration version. The trunk, at 520 liters, is not the largest in its class, but it offers a small storage option as a double loading floor, and below that, there's space, for example, for charging cables, to conveniently store the onboard tools or an energy kick. There ought to be more than enough room for all types of different adapters to fit comfortably. The width of the trunk appeared to be quite good, though the length felt somewhat limited. However, the rear seats can be adjusted to various angles. And, additionally, there's a Frunk, and at 58 liters, it's really quite large. It comes as a standard feature and can be opened with a cable pull inside the cabin. Let's stay inside the cabin. It's characteristically well crafted for BYD and features a similar design to all of their other models. There is a 15.6-inch main display and a 10.25-inch driver info display. Additionally, in the Excellence variant, there's the 10-inch head-up display. That all appears quite reasonable and characteristic for BYD. There are little light animations and also that switch in the middle. In the settings section, I find it really cool, a 50-watt wireless charging pad that includes cooling functionality. You rarely see that in the industry these days. Just recently at Kia, we were still excited about an increase of 15 watts. The seats are incredibly comfortable, exquisitely crafted, and they always come with an electric adjustment feature. The car, in its current form, has nothing to do with the Seal U, which I criticized quite heavily in the video back then for having a very, very mushy suspension. Setting aside the technical specifications, I just didn't like it that much. This has certainly improved quite a bit now. You can clearly see it's the platform from the standard Seal and not an outdated platform that really has little to do with the Seal as a sedan. You can really notice it on the highway as well, as the car feels tighter, gives off a more confident impression, and I also quite like it, yeah. The responsiveness is typical for BYD, so when you step on it, it comes out more like an arc, rather than having that punch you might expect from other electric cars. But that's enough for most. We're using a short, limited stretch here to talk about the assistance systems. Unfortunately, they only go up to a speed of 125, so I can't show it to you at the targeted speed of 130. He consistently keeps the lane perfectly centered. There haven't been any problems whatsoever where he failed to recognize or detect anything. The only thing I'm not too fond of is that if I want to overtake the vehicle in front of me, I really have to wait until I'm completely in the lane before it starts to accelerate. And you have to turn the steering wheel slightly, which means it doesn't have sensors directly in the wheel. Now, accelerating from 100 here, there's definitely some good push forward. And we're setting the cruise control again, this time at 130 to consistently maintain our speed. The way it braked for the vehicle ahead was somewhat late for me as well, so one suddenly merged into the lane in front of us, and then it took too long to react before braking, and then it was very abrupt. From my perspective, the monitoring of the accompanying track seems to be started somewhat later than it should be. For example, the Volkswagen Group, Tesla, or even NIO, which we're currently testing, a Chinese brand as well, they do this much better, taking it into account and noticing when someone changes lane. I didn't quite like this part here. In the curve, the rear really pushes significantly, so you can tell that the rear motor has quite a bit more power, and you can definitely feel that. Because sometimes you don't even notice that you've got all-wheel drive under you. And of course, you can't miss the 0 to 100 acceleration, just step on it. Yeah, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, it pulls really well, despite the fact that it's not exactly punchy. Nonetheless, one has to honestly say, as we notice with numerous other manufacturers these days, possibly to safeguard the drive shafts, they're somewhat dialing back the power a little bit. That it accelerates more subtly. The topic of recuperation is still pending, with 2 modes available in this vehicle, selectable below. Set via an extra button, standard and high recuperation. I have to be really honest, you barely notice any significant difference between standard and high recuperation modes here. Well, it's really both more of a very slight delay, unlike other manufacturers who are increasingly opting for a one-pedal driving experience or at least permitting significantly higher regeneration. I find it a bit too little here, which is very unfortunate. And then, of course, the topic of software. BYD has recently launched a new software update, which is claimed to have fundamentally transformed the route planning functionalities. That's why we're going to check it out. Using the voice input, navigate me to Vienna. Include a charging station route. Now it's doing something. I wonder what it is. Let's see. Route with running out. Yes, including charging stations, specifically in 334 kilometers, there's an Aral Pal station, and then after 688 kilometers, you'll find a SmartRick station. But it doesn't show that, does it? With how much we arrive and with how much we continue, but does it show the price and how many charging stations there are? But no charging time. Upon arrival, the battery remains at 80%. That's almost a bit high for me. Doesn't have to arrive with 80% then, so he plans the route for me including charging stops, but just without additional information. What's my charge on arrival? How long to charge? When can I go? I kind of missed that aspect, but fortunately, at least the route planning is there now. Generally, you can of course also rotate the display. It really almost has to be that way. Then inside here, it's a BYD model, so that's why you have the card displayed upwards, and you can conveniently see the various apps located down here. They're either displayed in a list here, or you can alternatively find and set up a split screen for that purpose. This means you have the option to include and integrate several different variations into this area as well. I would take this one. And the next one, and I would like to experience that now. So then it gets split, and then I can choose one of the other apps down here. You can switch it here too, like if the passenger needs to quickly input the navigation. For that, it might actually not be so bad at all. Or if, as a driver, you quickly want to change the music. When you're using Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, it functions solely in the landscape mode. So if that is important to you, let me mention it here as well. And the arrows from Apple CarPlay are also mirrored in the head-up display. We've also seen with other vehicles recently that not only do those come in when they turn, but also these, let's say, semi-AR arrows are visible on the display accordingly. I like that the new OS conveniently lets you opt to display the map directly on the screen. as a background option and not just through the map feature itself. Plus, you have the widgets at the bottom offering extra accessibility and functionality directly on your main screen. I used to miss that quite often because previously you had to resort to using that mandatory split screen function. That has now changed here, and we'll also take a quick look through all the different apps once more. There's Amazon Music on here now, and Spotify, which was available before. For instance, you can also continuously display the camera feed right here using a dedicated button in the car. That always pleases some when you can see the lane, to see if I'm actually still in the middle. There's a button right on the steering wheel for that. As for the speed, to mention it here, I would prefer it to be more consistent because I've set the cruise control to 130 and I almost never see 130 on the speedometer because I currently have 131 going uphill here, as the car apparently thinks it needs to give a little more gas. But I also had stretches showing 128 with the cruise control set to 130 all along. I find that a bit challenging, and regarding the driver information display to wrap up the software part. It displays really cool information, such as consistently showing various different road users right there in the center. Information display. On the left side, you can then scroll through different displays like the current fuel consumption or even the tire pressure. And on the right, there's also a media view. The head-up display in front of me is relatively rudimentary. It can display arrows, the current status of the assistance systems, and the speed. But essentially, what you need isn't anything beyond that. So no real AR features at all like those you'll find in the Volkswagen group. But that is genuinely reasonable for this and also razor sharp. Plus it offers an exceptionally high positioning field, which is designed to accommodate all body sizes. Now, I decided to sit in the second row again during the ride, simply because it's incredibly comfortable. To be chauffeured a few more meters, because if we want to cover a few kilometers of highway for you, then it only makes sense if I use the time back here briefly and experience it firsthand. And right now, I'm sitting here in the most uncomfortable position. That means the backrest is as steep as it can be for me, and the passenger seat is set relatively comfortably. However, as you can see on the left seats, I can adjust the backrest in many different stages here. And this expands the trunk space, making it larger, or greatly enhances the interior comfort. And I must say, you really sit comfortably back here. The seat surface is pleasantly long. I can comfortably fit my feet under the front seat, specifically under the passenger seat in this case. And one really cool feature is that the passenger seat is also equipped with ISOFIX, just like the two outer rear seats. And that's just very exciting and attractive in everyday life, especially for a family because you have the child. And can place it on the passenger seat, so as a driver, you can be on the road alone with your child without having to constantly look back. It's highly practical, and I've really come to value it. The interior material is typically BYD, consistently the same in both back and front. That means we have soft materials everywhere, a mix of this kind of fleece material, and then also leather, because in the highest trim, there is genuine leather. Only in the other two versions do you receive a faux leather variant. So once again, it's the compromise for those who don't. If you really want to have it built in here, unfortunately, you can't choose the highest equipment package. When it comes to driving acoustics, there's clearly more noise from the trunk entering the car's interior than I'd prefer. Didn't we discuss this earlier? I actually found it pleasantly quiet and truly very good to drive around here. In the rear, it becomes a bit louder. Not through the windows, but rather the sound from the back permeates into the interior somewhat. And let's not forget, there are certainly ways to achieve an even more comfortable driving experience. Alright, so once more, adjust the backrest backwards. There you go, it's done. And right here, you have a convenient cup holder along with a practical storage option. It's quite comfortable to drive there, and there's one feature I didn't mention earlier. The cup holders in the front can be adjusted to different levels. This way, you can insert the water bottle deeper down, or if you're holding a coffee-to-go cup, lift it up so it fits comfortably in place. I've never really seen it like this anywhere else before. I found it to be wonderfully comfy. The seat heating is generally available on the outer seats. Also a cool feature, plus we need to discuss the sound. Here, a slim audio system has been installed. A lot of emphasis was placed on that aspect. It seems somewhat centrally positioned and slightly muffled to me. Unfortunately, due to the very limited amount of time we had, we didn't have the chance to fine-tune it further in the final part, to explore where you can refine the audio. However, for a first impression, it truly creates a very good overall picture here. Also, this huge glass panoramic roof, I just like it. It's all in this car, and which will please many of you. It comes with a sunshade. And naturally, the subject of maximum speed cannot be missing. The vehicle is electronically limited. According to BYD, at 215 kilometers per hour. Let's see how fast it goes. Starting at around 170, you can feel the wind noise becoming noticeable from the front. I mentioned just back there, though, that overall it was still quite good. From an acoustic point of view, we're hitting 225 km/h on the speedometer, which is 10 km/h more than BYD claims. It's clear it isn't here according to the GPS. We'd need to take another look separately, but that really is quite a lot. And let's take a look at the brakes. Phew, it really swings in there well. It also shifts a little bit right-left. Well, I mentioned earlier that the suspension is a bit sportier. Don't misunderstand me, it is definitely not truly sporty. It's important for me to emphasize this again, so it's clearly sportier than what the BYD Seal U was. However, it's not as sporty as the regular Seal. Of course, it also has an SUV build, meaning it's a tad higher. You can tell it has been adjusted, and you can also tell that the chassis was designed more for the European market and not just the 121 Chinese vehicle brought over to us. Because you're allowed to drive at higher speeds here, and you have to say, if BYD in their press release puts more emphasis on the top speed of 215 km/h than on the charging capacity, then they must be pretty proud of it, huh? So they should be able to do it properly then. You can go ahead and watch along now. So we're going to slow down the pace here to a speed of 100. Fortunately today we have a very clear highway, speed at 98, 99, and while accelerating, let's see how long it will take us. You can watch it through the camera as it goes from 100 all the way up to 200, just to really get a sense of how it feels. The acceleration beyond 100 is noticeably more than what it did from a standstill earlier. And it definitely feels like once he really gets going, he accelerates out quite well indeed. 94, 97, 98, 200. Yeah, that's all right. With these impressive 390 kilowatts of system power, the Sealion 7 perfectly lands in the category where a Tesla Model Y performance used to be, which was my old car. It had 3,7 seconds, including the rollout from 0 to 100. This one is around 4. Officially at 4,5 if you consider it from a standstill. That means it is very comparable. However, it has a significantly larger battery, but is much mushier compared to the Tesla. So if you take the difference, it's a whole different driving experience. In this context, it's somewhat better for me compared to the CLU, yet it's still not reaching the level where you'd commonly associate it with sporty cars, even though it was portrayed as being quite performant. It's really quite a mixed review, I would have to say, particularly in terms of the chassis. I tested it out briefly once more, and the adaptive cruise control only reaches up to 130, whereas the lane guidance feature is limited to 125. But let's move on to the conclusion, and it's somewhat mixed because the consumption values we observed today were pretty much what I had anticipated regarding the WLTP range predictions. The average consumption of just under 19 kilowatt hours while we were mostly driving in the city and only a little on country roads is a tad too high for me. There's a Tesla Model Y with all-wheel drive and performance sometimes at 13 kilowatt hours, and it just consumes way too much for me. On the highway at a constant 130, I actually planned for us to drive the longer distance at 130. Now, the car either indicates 100 kilometers, which we certainly couldn't manage, or shows 50 kilometers. Then we decided, okay, we'll drive 50 kilometers back and forth to balance the topography. And then we were at 30 kilowatt hours average consumption. And that's clearly too much for me. To push the limits and drive faster on a short stretch to find out what the maximum speed is. As you just saw, we were at almost 45 kilowatt hours. And that's just cumulative, because we didn't even drive 50 kilometers that fast. And something definitely needs to be added, because what good is it to me if I have a rear motor with 23,000 revolutions per minute? If it then obviously consumes more fuel than many other vehicles, in my view, it is by far the best BYD you can get right now. Indeed, the Seal itself is also somewhat intriguing, but particularly in the European market where SUVs of this specific type, as they become more appealing and capture an ever larger share of the market, I firmly believe this will be the main driving force for BYD in the foreseeable future. I'll show you the prices here. It starts at under 50,000 euros, and as it stands here, it's at 59,000 euros. You're equipped with a large battery and complete equipment. I'm really quite curious to know your thoughts on it. Feel free to leave a comment below. What do you think about this vehicle? What are your thoughts or, well, sort of impressions that you're taking away from watching this rather rushed video? I apologize for that. As I'd mentioned earlier, we unfortunately had just 1.5 hours. For me, it's really a good competitor to all the other vehicles. And if you now want to see how the regular CLU almost embarrassed itself on the highway, then check up here and down here you can see my farewell video to the Tesla Model Y.